it into perspective. Over 3,500 years ago, probably close to 4,000 years ago now, or possibly even longer, a comet that eventually became the planet Venus had an interaction with the planet Mars. It removed the oceans and atmosphere of Mars, and this is all historically documented from many nations around the world. That was the last time that we saw as Earthlings a comet come that close to a planet. And once again, Comet Ison passed a mere 7 million miles away from the planet Mars. This happened on October 1st. I would note also that all of the NASA orbital pages have not been updated or have been corrupted to give false positions of where Comet Ison is located. During the nearest approach, it came up over the top, like the equivalent of our North Pole. If you take the example of Earth, try and give you an equivalent example, it would be like a comet coming up over our North Pole from the non-sunward side and then heading directly towards the sun, dropping down between us in the sun. And now remember, this is an example so that you understand what the comet did at the planet Mars. The comet came over the top of Mars, and remember, it did not come near Earth. I just used that as an example because we have a North Pole and a South Pole. But imagine that Mars spins similarly to Earth and is a water planet, was a water planet before the Venus event. But Comet Ison came up over its North Pole from beyond and then dropped down in front of the planet Mars as it passed along on its route to the sun. So right now it's between Mars and the sun. And from our vantage point, if you wake up in the morning sky, the moon is no longer a factor. The moon will not come up and rise for a long time. So if you get up like early in the morning, like I imagine around 1 in the morning, Mars is rising off the horizon in the northern hemisphere. And right there by Mars is Comet Ison. It's pretty small, but I'll go through a review of what Comet Ison did over the past week and then explain the physics of each of these. And by the way, I predicted all of this, which, what can I say? You know, I've had decades of experience understanding, watching comets, and seeing what they do and how they interact with other planets, other members of the solar system, etc. And so, anyway, let's start with September 24th, which was actually prior to my previous show. And for reasons, I guess, that I was looking in another direction, I didn't quite see this occurring. The issue with Comet Ison turning green. Now, by the way, these things are very difficult to detect with average equipment because in the night sky, up to that point, Comet Ison was an extremely small comet. And so the information about Comet Ison turning green came out of the standard press. And and also there was a NASA website that posted that Comet Ison had turned green. It appeared on the University of Arizona site, which sponsors the Mars Orbiting Observatory. And that's a satellite that's orbiting Mars right now and was taking pictures of Comet Ison. But anyway, that's where that page stopped. I have not seen, up to the airing of this show, there's not been any new postings coming from NASA. NASA had a worldwide observing program for amateurs. That's dead in the water. Have not seen anything regarding that. The images that have been placed, for example, on spaceweather.com, a couple amateur images, very faint, very poor quality photos over the last couple of days. There's nothing of decent quality. Now you have to understand that the NASA equipment, the satellites, the cameras, do not belong to NASA. So in this government shutdown, the cameras, the information from satellites, etc., is still coming in and being processed for Tier 1 science. That's the science that is up and above what you see at NASA, what the visible part of NASA. So that information is obviously being passed up the ladder, and that very much is controlled by New World Order entities. So the real good data is certainly there. It's not being passed to you. And I had a very interesting email that came in that was forwarded to me from another person who is an amateur, who once was a professional astronomer, but criticizing the use of NASA data, that all of this hoopla about amateurs sending photos to NASA. And he goes, well, clearly NASA has much better photos than amateurs can get. Why do they want pictures from amateurs? Well, see, that's what they can pawn off on you. And that's what's happening. This person's observations are absolutely correct, that amateurs have, some cases, okay equipment, but then it gets filtered through NASA. I noticed that Comet Ison very much has a sunward spike, and has had since the 29th, when it first started, the 29th of September. But none of these pictures show a sunward spike. So we're dealing with extremely poor quality photos, very fuzzy, very few pixels, let's put it that way, in the area of the comet. You see a comet, yeah, it's a comet, but no details. So at any rate, but okay, so let's go back. The comet turned green on the 24th of September. Well, I talked at length about comets turning green, luminosity in comets. I spent many programs discussing the history of luminosity of comets and how it got swept under the rug at a certain point, and it finally got buried in 1996 with the discovery of X-rays in comets. Now, that's another point. Comet Ison, like all comets, is producing X-rays. Clearly, NASA has equipment and is measuring that property of Comet Ison, especially as it passes Mars. None of this data is available to the public. Of the 60 or more instruments of NASA that are satellites, ground-based, and otherwise, of the facilities available to NASA, none of that, absolutely none of that is being reported to the public. And clearly, here's what you would see if you had good equipment. You would see Comet Ison connecting electrically with Mars. Now, Mars is a planet. It's in the solar capacitor, just like all the other planets, and it has the ability to connect to other objects in the solar system, including Jupiter, including Earth, including Venus, although Mars is kind of out there all by itself right now, not aligning with any other items, objects in the solar system. But the reality is that Comet Ison was right behind it on the 24th. Comet Ison turned green because the electrical current passing through the comet was accelerated greatly. Okay, so the 24th Comet Ison turns green, and I said that it would be excited. And so that could mean a number of things. That could be the comet expanded in size. That could mean it, as in this case, it turned green. And many of those electrical effects caused by an electrical connection with Mars. Another bit of humor here, the NASA webpage and then spaceweather.com attributed this to ultraviolet light. Well, ultraviolet light from the sun is everywhere. It's not just near Mars. It's not just, like a thin line or something like that. Ultraviolet light from the sun is all over, and it's very evenly distributed all over. So what makes the ultraviolet light special when Comet Ison approaches Mars? Well, of course, In Tier 2 fairy tale science, they don't have to answer those questions because nobody can get a word in edgewise. They don't allow questions. They don't allow communication in to spaceweather.com. They don't allow people to point out issues like that. So, and of course, all the NASA web pages are down, so there's no commenting to any of those people. And by the way, when they shut the government down, they also lock the doors. You cannot get back concerned about Comet Ison. They have an immense program of misinformation in place to move the public away from seeing anything that has to do with Comet Ison. Okay, so the 24th, Comet Ison turns green. Now, on the 30th of September, did I say October? The 24th of September, Comet Ison turns green. On the 30th of September, Comet Ison develops a sunward spike. This is where kind of all of the government information just kind of hit a brick wall. It did not come out. There was nothing available that I saw on any available websites about even discussing the fact that it developed the sunward spike. And at that point, it would be connected with, very definitely, with the planet Mars, because within a day, it would be passing above the planet Mars. Okay, now on as far as information is concerned, there was pretty much a shutdown of information, and I noticed my emails, because we were doing some tests on my email system, lots of stuff coming to me was getting blocked. And so that's very clear. So amateurs were trying to send me information, send emails to communicate, and obviously being blocked. So, but on the 30th of September, Comet Ison develops a spike, and that's something that I've always predicted dealing with comets, that activity like this, or for example, when we come up to the November 13th, 14th time frame this coming November, the Comet Ison will be right in the back door of the little planet Mercury. And wow, what a time. That is going to be a much bigger event than the Mars passage. I'm predicting that that is going to be an event where clearly the planet Mercury, I'm expecting to go comet. What does go comet mean? It's a term I developed to tell you that as the comet interacts, as Comet Ison interacts with the planet Mercury, Mercury would actually develop a comet tail. So let's come back to the last couple of days. Now, Tuesday morning, by the way, I have personally had pristine, absolutely crystal clear night skies where I am. I'm doing my own observing of Comet Ison, and I have very good equipment, and I know how to observe and how to make sure I don't have aberrations in my lens or fog on my lens, or there's other conditions, say clouds or atmospheric conditions, that are contributing to my observations. I have had absolutely cloudless, wall-to-wall, ceiling-to-ceiling, absolutely perfect, pristine viewing conditions where I am. And so I've had very good view of Mars, of the comet. And on October 2nd in the morning, this is now as Comet Ison moves between Mars and the Sun, as it dropped down in its orbit, moving more between between the Sun and Mars. And now remember that the comet tail of Ison is starting to, Mars is falling into the area of the comet tail. It was very clear that Mars went comet. A soft halo developed around the planet Mars. On about 3 o'clock, I was observing around 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning.